election season, and we have a couple of things that are going on. You probably have heard from Virginia, where a judge there said, "Oh, yeah, you can't exclude 1,600 people who are not U.S. citizens from voting." And now Republicans are asking the Supreme Court to block a judicial decision from Pennsylvania requiring the counting of provisional ballots cast by voters who make mistakes in their mail-in ballots, which could affect potentially, and I don't know how many, but it's being said thousands of votes coming up next Tuesday. And they asked the justices to put a hold on a ruling from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court from October 23rd, ruling in favor of two Butler County voters who sought to have their provisional ballots counted after their mail-in ballots were rejected because they didn't lack secrecy envelopes. So provisional ballots, the way I understand it, Jeremy, are if you're having an issue or something when it comes to voting, you go down to your elections office, they give you a paper ballot, and it's considered a provisional ballot while they try to work out whatever the issue is. Am I correct on that?
I think that's right. And the issue here is, and you did a great job of explaining it, the issue here is, does the error in your initial ballot qualify you for a provisional? Right? Is that a pressing circumstance? Is that a compelling need for one? And that's going to be governed by Pennsylvania law, which on this topic is as clear as mud. Hence, the courts are involved. So, right, you do your ballot, your mail-in ballot. It says do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lick it with your thumb and put it on there, and then sign it over here. Do all that stuff. A computer rejects it, and then do we have the right at that point to file a provisional? And yeah, it can affect maybe up to 10,000 votes.
Okay. So I guess the question then is, what would be something that the judges would consider to be excluded? Because you just said the law in Pennsylvania is clear as mud. What's muddying it?
Just the way that they drafted the language of it. So the Pennsylvania law does not say if you it doesn't say one way or the other. If you screwed your ballot up on the mail-in go round, it doesn't say one way or another, is my understanding, whether you have the right to then file a provisional. What they're going by is, when do you have the right to file a provisional, and when does that provisional get counted? And in that instance, again, it turns on the circumstance and the need. So what qualifies as the circumstance or the need? Now, and it may turn back to each individual case, right? Somebody votes and says, look, it's the computer that said that I didn't do all these things. I did all these things, right? Or it could be that, I could see it going the other way, where the judges come back and say, well, no, you had your chance, you screwed it up, and no, you don't get a do-over, right? So that's kind of where that issue is. And really what the feds are, they're not so much looking at that. The states have the right to govern themselves. The legislatures are given the right to administer a federal election. And the courts in Pennsylvania have a limited degree of supervision over that. And that's probably where the justices are going to sort of say, okay, well, Pennsylvania has the right. The legislature is the one who writes this law, but the judiciary, as always, has oversight of the legislature. And so where does the federal courts, where do they come in on this? And so they're not going to probably weigh in on whether it's fair or not that these people, that their votes count or don't count. What the Supreme Court's probably going to do is they're probably going to say, well, we think that the Pennsylvania courts have the right to govern the have the right to say what the legislature is doing here or not. I mean, and look, it's only the fate of the free world, right? I mean, 10,000 votes in the most important state, probably in this election, right? I mean, who cares about that? I mean, I'm just saying, and this is an appetizer. This is an appetizer for next week, right? I've got a funny feeling that this time next week there may be another election story going on about ballots and counting in courts. It's a guess. It's a guess.
Now, my understanding is, because when I introduced this, I mentioned the thing that happened in Virginia. My understanding is that it made the Supreme Court docket. Is that true or not?
I'd have to double check on that. I know that there's a lot of, and there's a lot. One of the big problems that you have is, and the way the parties I think look at it is, you can't move the goalposts at the last second. And look, these are issues. If you've got, and I know that, and I think one of the things we're learning about, all of us, are, well, when do voting rolls get purged, right? When do we cut the dead wood away? When do we, somebody has moved and didn't tell anybody that they were moving, and or somebody has passed away. And I mean, when somebody dies, I mean, let's face it, probably the last people that you notify are the voting rolls, right? So, these things are sort of fluid, and the secretaries of states in these states that are handling this, I mean, they've got their hands full. If they've got some voters on there that shouldn't be on there for whatever reason, I think the issue is, well, what's the deadline to kick them off? And does the state have how is the states, do they have the right to manage this? These voting rules, and does it comply with the Constitution? So I think that's where that stands. And I think the way that the federal courts are going to really, and going back to the Pennsylvania one for a second, really what the courts, I think, are going to come down and do is they're going to say, okay, everybody keep the evidence, keep your provisional ballots, put them in a pile, keep all these computer tossed away mail-in ballots, put those in a different pile. And then I think the court crosses their fingers and prays that that Pennsylvania is decided by 500,000 votes and not 11,000 votes, right? So that way they can say, okay, well, we'll resolve this issue in June, So I think that's kind of candidly what they're hoping happens in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, and with all of these issues, is they hope that, I think they'll resolve it. But I don't think that, I think that they want to do everything that they can possibly do to not have to decide this election.
Okay. Well, great. That'll be fun. Yeah, let's just make it worse.
It all comes down to making sure that the lawyers in these situations are paid, and paid well.
Nice plug.
Well done.
I mean, I'm just saying, I wish somebody would worry about me for a change,
Somebody, the lawyers need love too. Let's be honest.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Jeremy.
I will say this, everybody wants like a little stimulus package, right? The CEOs of this, the U.S. Constitution is the ultimate lawyer stimulus package. If it wasn't for that thing, man, I couldn't feed my family.
There's a lot of truth to that. There is a lot of truth to that. All right. Unfortunately, we have another guest coming up because you and I could talk about this for a while, and I know you've got stuff to do, like going and collecting legal fees. So,
hopefully,
hopefully.
Yeah.
Do you find? Okay. Briefly, do you find? Do you get stiffed very often?
Okay, so the short answer, my cup overrunneth. I am blessed to have a very strong law practice. We have 10 lawyers at our firm, and we do. Every lawyer is going to get stiffed every now and again, but we do everything that we can do to collect up front, to be fair with our fees, to follow all the rules, and from time. And look, if I'm not going to get paid in the case, and in all seriousness, my view is it's going to be my choice, right? If I've got a client who I believe in and we get really far along in their case and they just don't have the money to keep up the fight, there are instances where we'll say, you know what, let's finish this. So, God willing, it's my choice if I'm not getting paid. But yeah, there's plenty of lawyers out there that aren't quite as they don't have they don't do such a hot job in making sure that they get paid up front. But every time a lawyer gets paid, an angel gets their wings. We talked about this.
That's right. I've seen that in a couple of movies. All right. Well, go out there and wing some angels today, and we'll talk to you later, Jeremy.
All right, guys. Take care.
Jeremy Rosenthal on the wake-up call this morning. It's KPNW.